Okay, I'm going to get started. Welcome. Just as I'm actually, this is a redo of this first half of part 6 because I added some material, just thought it would be a little more clear, added a few important pieces. So I just for flow purposes, I wanted to redo yesterday's. If you've been through yesterday's, I think this would be a great um, repetition of some of the material, and then the new material will be helpful. So feel free to stick around. Chat window's open if you have any questions or whatever. I'll do my best to answer during, or if you send me your email, I can get back to you directly. So I still haven't finished the last couple of modules, but I'm suspecting this will run about 9 to 10 parts. So with this being 2, that will finish part 7 this week, assuming no technical difficulties, and then we'll run through the end of next week and into the following. So, some reason you're off lockdown sooner rather than later, great. Now, why are you listening to me on this topic in general? Well, really the most important is, at least the last 5 years, I've been designing, building, and maintaining multicast networks. Right, enterprise, cross WANs, right? So these certifications all sort of feed into that, sure. I've got wireless and wired at the professional level, working on the expert level, not there yet. And of course, can't make any immediate progress anyway, right? I need to actually have an open testing center to do something. I'm hoping Cisco moves to more, like the other vendors have been moving to some online testing, at least for the written exams. Anyway, if you want to look in more details about what my current certs are, you can look in that Acclaim link, youracclaim.com. You can take a look if you're curious. Disclaimers. Cisco's not paying for this. Cisco didn't write this. And no one in particular is paying me to do this, right? I'm doing it because, well, I like teaching. I had a teaching credential. You don't see that on the list of certs, but I had a teaching credential at one point. I actually left tech, went back into tech, taught for briefly. What public schools weren't a great fit for me. Sorry. And I'm going to be really clear. If anything, like you hear me talk about bidirectional PIM, I've never done bidirectional PIM. I know what it is. I know what it looks like. And when I talk about it, I'm really clear. I haven't done this, right? And I also haven't done multicast across the public internet. It's an interesting topic, and I think it's one of those rabbit holes that I'm dependent on every link having PIM enabled, and that just seems like a nightmare. I'm sure that I would do something and then have some client, well, it doesn't work, and then you have to crawl down a bunch of ISPs so you can find out where it's getting blocked, right? Yeah, assuming everyone will cooperate with you. What is multicast? Group, transmission to a group. Group is 0 or more computers. It is now 35 years old. First imagined in RFC 966. You read that, it's not what multicast is now, but you can see some of the ideas they had. There are things you'll see in there. The example is the group had some management functions to say you're in and you're not, and that doesn't exist. Not in the way they envisioned it. Okay. What are you going to do in this section? We're going to really work. There's a little bit of new material, slight bit, and then we're going to dig into troubleshooting. So the testing and troubleshooting is important, right? Because I'm going to tell you this. Multicast is very application specific. You don't do multicast for the fun of it, right? There's all of a sudden, like, there's no reason I would take my SSH client and multicast with it. That makes no sense. So it's specific. It's application specific. So in an enterprise some department, some division, it's like, we're buying this app, we've got to have this multicast network, and you're going to have to build it, design and build the multicast network with very little input from the vendor, typically. And then when it goes wrong, the vendor's going to go, it's your network, which you're used to on unicast anyway. The difference is you probably have a lot of skill at troubleshooting unicast. So just go on and get this. I'm not even going to say much today on this one, but look, you know, given right now budgets are super tight for a lot of things, and they're like, well, I'm cutting your budget in half. That's cool, man. What can we drop to make this work? Maybe spreading timeout might help, but more than likely not. And this one, what can I drop to stay in budget? And they're like, nothing. I've been there. I've been in those conversations. Believe me. No, you can't drop anything. Same time, you just have to come in with half the money. Like, I got to drop something, man. What is multicast, right? One stream per interested link, one only, okay? And I keep showing you this. The idea is from the perspective of the sender. If I have to maintain a bunch of different unicast streams, then I have a linear increase in bandwidth. If I do it in multicast, it's flat. So, with COVID, hey, would you rather have the orange line or the blue line? I'm thinking blue line. Yeah. I added in this one just some clarification that there's a source specific range. So we started talking about that. There's a breakout in this class D, and then reminder, you get to play in 239. You shouldn't be playing in the other spaces unless you're an app developer, and then you can go to IANA and you can say, hey, I developed this application, we're going to use multicast. This is the group for that application. So you'll see, like Hewlett Packard's done it. They have a printer discovery. If you look through, you're going to see just that. They've registered. It belongs to them. No one else is supposed to use it. But given that people don't understand multicast, don't be surprised if you have something running and you find out it's not. It looks like it should be the HP. No, it's something else. They just didn't know any better. Yeah. And group address is always the destination, never a source. Always the destination, never a source. Got that? RFCs, whatever that. These global commands, super important. Those are the ones, the first one is an absolute. You have no choice unless you're doing link local, right? If you're just running OSPF and you have Ethernet, so you're doing multicast between the nodes, sure, fine, you don't need this. If you're actually routing multicast, you have an app that is running multicast that needs to go between VLANs or between layer 3 devices, you got to turn that on, right? The multipath is helpful. So far, I have not found it to be harmful in my implementations. Certainly that possibility exists. The idea is that it's supposed to deal with looping issues. When that's not there, we block anything except the one primary path, so I'm sure I'm not having loops. But because I'm depending on the unicast routing, and sometimes the hash wants to take it one route versus the other, then all of a sudden my multicast breaks. So that's why that's there, and it's very helpful with equal cost multipath. This is the new content. This is, and I'm going a little fast on purpose. So multicast boundaries. So I can actually contain my traffic. I have a WAN connection, but I want to keep in some of the traffic. So I can do something. I got to look through it. I got to think through that list, like why that was there. I think I stole that from somebody. I'm blocking because I should be permitting more, and then I'm blocking some. I don't know. Anyway, this filter auto RP, what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to. My mapping agent is sending out and say, hey, I know about this RP. He's authoritative for these groups, and one of those groups is going to get blocked by the filter. By adding that filter auto RP on the end, it'll take that out of the advertisement. It'll keep the other pieces, but it'll kill that. It only seems to work in the outbound direction. I don't know if that's on purpose or that's just my Catalyst implementations or whatever, but when someone else in the enterprise leaves that out and you're running on RP, then all of a sudden you can have your mapping agent can learn about this other RP, but it can't use the RP. because the traffic it's trying to do joins with will get blocked at that boundary. So it'll try and make the joins to this RP that's outside the boundary because it saw the advertisement and said, this is the guy you're supposed to work with, but the boundary is going to block it. In the outbound directions, it's okay. Cisco is very clear, don't ever do this directly on the RP. So if I have like a collapsed core and that's where, say I do a collapsed core VSS and that's where I have the RP, I wouldn't put these boundaries on the outbound side of the core going to the WAN routers. I would stick them on the outbound on the WAN routers because that means I'm not directly on the RP. Cisco is big on like, don't do it. It causes you problems. Don't do it. I didn't go into details as attack engineer is very, that's the basics on this one. So they're very useful because there are times I want to make sure the traffic stays contained. So just an example. So there's a product from Philips, the bedside monitors. The bedside monitors stream multicast to a local workstation that aggregates all that data, and then it does a multicast stream back to a central server, and then that can be fed into your electronic medical records. So it's kind of nice. We could actually keep this telemetry. So if there's ever a problem later, we can show, the nurses didn't pick up that your blood oxygen dropped too low, or, there was an event, they can actually go in and dig that data out. And it's, some of this telemetry is awesome because there are things like, if you're put under with anesthesia, that they can really show they were under control if they didn't put you too deep. Some people have some pretty serious after effects from going too deep with anesthesia. That it's great to have this telemetry, but as multicast, it shouldn't leave that. I can use a boundary and that keeps it from leaving. So for some reason, somebody was a listener on the outside, that we know for sure that this filter in place, that traffic can't get there. It'll stay contained within that, wherever I've bounded this campus, it'll stay contained. Your other boundary is more severe where I turn off PIM, right, on the WAN side. I can do that. I can turn off PIM. That's, that's not just putting a toll gate on the bridge. That's, blowing up the bridge. There is no bridge. You're not crossing this river. The other piece of new material here is just here with DR priority. So designated router, you saw that on the map that I've been showing on the different segments. And that one, that's who's supposed to be doing the PIM joins upstream. It's chosen by the highest IP address. So often just the way we build in our brains, we say we have pair HSRP, core 1 or distribution 1, we have the lower IP, distribution 2, we have the higher IP. So it'll be 2 and 3, for example, .2, .3 on that interface. Well, .3 wants to be the DR. But you can control that with this DR priority. Default priority is 1, highest wins. I forgot what the top end number, maybe 255, maybe higher. We can look it up. I know in some of the stuff I was reading a couple years back that there was supposed to be the ability to do to change that priority value dynamically. And with something less than, say, an event manager script, which certainly, event manager is very powerful, and you can do some things like that if you're good at Tickle. That the idea was you were supposed to be able to do this just like you do when you're tracking and your HSRP. So I can fail over HSRP for, say, I see that the uplinks have gone down on distribution 1. So I want to have distribution 2 now as the HSRP primary active. That it's supposed to be there. I haven't seen it in all the platforms. I haven't seen the implementation. But I remember reading about it a few years back, and it's something to look out for. I'd like to do it, and I'd love to do it without having to do the TCL scripts, because of course TCL, it's not supported to do that. Okay, now we're going to dive into troubleshooting for the last about 10, 15 minutes. We're going to just kind of get going. Some of this is repetitious, but that's fine. So I want to troubleshoot Rendezvous Point. Now, one of the things to bear in mind throughout whatever your multicast domain is, your view on these rendezvous points needs to be consistent. So if I use a different RP than you do, and I mean totally different RP, that without MSDP, that we are not going to connect. Our sources and receivers aren't going to connect. They need to share the RPs. And this is by group. So, Campus A is using the 239.200, Campus B is using 239.201. That's fine. They have their own RP local to each campus, and they don't care because I'm using one set of groups on one Campus A and another on Campus B. Those don't have to be consistent. But say I have 239.100.0/16, and that's enterprise. I need to see that show up in this show IP PIM RP mapping. And I need whatever RP it's going to be the same. And these are the important things to see. This tells me some great stuff, right? It said this was done through AutoRP, where it's a mapping agent on this VLAN. This is the group that this RP is authoritative for. And this is the mapping agent that told me about it. Now, the reason I showed in the in part 5 that I would use, when using Anycast, I would use one IP for the RP, and that would be the consistent across all of the redundant RPs. And then the info source would use a local, a unique loopback address, management loopback, you might want to call it. So that way, when I saw this information, if for some reason, say for example, it said 224.0.0.0/4, well, I know that I've somehow made a mistake in defining the RP. So it thinks it's authoritative for all multicast addresses. And that's not what I wanted. And so if I see that, I can go back to the info source and say, oh, somebody wiped out the ACL, or the command didn't get entered correctly on that RP, and I can fix it. If I've used the the Anycast RP for the mapping agent, well, then I've got to look at them all. Now, if there's only 2, it's not so bad. If it's more, then I'm chasing this down through all of them, having to check and make sure they're all correct. So consistent, and then you're picking up some, and you see it's got an expiration. So if it's not getting this information renewed, it's going to age it out. And with AutoRP, it's picking one. We're going to see there's a big difference when using BSR. Okay. This one was about the AutoRP. So I am the AutoRP. It's enabled. And this thing is important over AutoRP groups over sparse mode interfaces enabled. So what that's telling you basically is that those 2 groups, the 224.0.0.39 or 40, those 2 groups are all about finding the mapping agent and finding the RP. Well, how do I do that without an RP? I don't. So the only way that works is by Cisco, that command, that IP PIM AutoRP listener turns that piece on. So it'll go across, that it'll dense mode, it'll send those across multiple hops. So that's important and useful. And then, I've sent and received. If those numbers are really off, the discovery, there's only one mapping agent in this thing. So yeah, I need to receive that. This is the one I added, show up even BSR router, and it's got some new things, excuse me. And notice that, so it's over 2 times, it's 2.5 times, the whole time is 2.5 times the advertisement. I can adjust that. I can adjust the advertisement. We saw that that, and then this priority, that's a default priority. So, oh, I'm sorry, no, it's not. The BSR, on the BSR side, that was manually set, right? The default is 0, and it's the lowest that wins. So that's the weird thing about the bootstrap router, the one that tells everyone about the RPs. It tells me this is the candidate RP. Now I did this on purpose. Oops. That loopback 239, that to me is where I set the anycast. Now, this lab is too small to actually have a second device doing this, but it's there. And so with something like this, you're actually going to see all. The thing about BSR is it uncovers everyone who's doing this, so you get to see who they are, what their priority is, what their IP is, and they all share the information. So therefore, the information is always consistent. So when I'm picking based on priority, depending on if it's the RP, it's the highest priority. If it's the BSR, it's the lowest priority. That I can figure this out really easily. I can look at it. We all should have the exact same information, and we actually share. When I show the RP mapping with auto RP per group, it's going to show me 1. But with BSR, I'm actually going to see all of them, and it'll tell me about different priorities. So it's useful. And notice that PIM v2 bootstrap, well, PIM v2 is required. So if you're some old device that doesn't support PIM v, it only supports PIM v1, you got a problem. Can't do BSR. And there's my candidate priority. Default was 192. This is above it. So this guy's it. Okay. Time, still got a little bit of time. So that's the rendezvous point. Now, that one can be good sometimes where things are kind of working and kind of not working. So this particular set of groups isn't working. So things like the RP mapping, well, that can tell me that, oh, I know I set up an RP for this group. It's supposed to announce it. Why don't I see it? So this is helpful. Or something like I'm doing this, oh, well, he's pointed at a different RP for that group. Why is that? That's something I need to investigate. You know, is our RP turned on? Do I have it? Is it working? Is sending its announcement? Is discovery parts working? BSR, is it as as I designed it? I would not do is just throw this thing out with default priorities on everything. I wouldn't do that. If you are like my lab where it's like very, very small, sure, absolutely. You have control. It's really straightforward. It can make sense. Go ahead, right? If you really start getting more than 2 or 3 switches, start thinking about setting being deterministic. So going forward, so for example, I'm replacing my VSS cores. When I stick the new ones in, I want to control the priorities so that I would do things like bond the 2 cores, move the HSRP interfaces, keeping the PIM, the RP on the old devices for now, then migrating them over, right? So using those priorities to control how that happens, right? Yeah. And I would probably do it incrementally, right? So anyway, so then PIM. Well, certainly this has been an interesting one. Show IP interface, and there's great information. So am I run what PIM version? Am I sparse mode? Am I sparse dense? Dense mode? Do I have neighbors? I do. Query interval. And there's a DR priority, and who's the DR? Good stuff. I can do show IP PIM interface. See the list pop up. I can either do the next command I'll show you, or I can look through, and if I see neighbors 0, and I'm expecting there to be a neighbor on there, I can start looking into that. And I can go into some details. I haven't used this one so much. Certainly things like this hello in and out are useful. Yeah, that definitely play around with the commands. Look up some command references. You can get into the details of it and see what's useful. And then PIM neighbors, right? So it'll tell me about how long they've been up. When is this going to go down if they don't send hellos again? What version are we running? So what if I don't see the neighbors? Well, it could be just me missing a PIM statement. If I've made a mistake on the interface and had the unicast addresses are not in the same subnet, well, that'll kill it. And of course, physical link down. Now, maybe looking through the list, you see show IP PIM interfaces listed, and then, well, the interface can be up on your side, and if it's a pair of routers that are going through a switch, the other interface, maybe that other link may be physically down. So you're not seeing your neighbor. If you're not seeing neighbors that you're expecting, start looking at it. The other one you could do is you can put an IGMP filter or an ACL and you start blocking things. So if I ended up blocking the PIM between the neighbors, I have to be careful. Now, I'm okay. So with HSRP pairs, I don't necessarily need them to be neighbored to each other necessarily there. Certainly, I can have another layer 3 link between them where I make sure they are PIM neighbors. This is a great command, particularly around PIM. It can tell you a lot, and it'll also tell you about a lot about the RPs as well. Show IPM route, and I use the verbose command here option. And there's a lot of these great flags. So there is a register flag, which is telling you it's local. This L flag is telling you it's local. This group, this is one of those auto RP groups. Oh, I'm sorry, it's actually 10.221.01.39. I made a mistake earlier. Dense mode. And so there's no RP for it because it's dense mode. Now, null, when you see an incoming interface that's null, it thinks it's the RP. In both these cases, in this case, it thinks it's the RP for this group. If there was an RP, but it's not as dense mode, so it really doesn't. Outgoing interface list, those are where the receivers are. With a source, this is telling you this source is on this VLAN, coming in on this VLAN, and he's sending out, and it'll tell you which interfaces are interested in that traffic. In this case, they're none. P is a prune bit, so if I'm using any source multicast sparse mode, if I'm on the path between the source and the RP, but there's nobody, there's nobody on this path that wants the traffic. Once the RP has finished connecting the source to the receivers, that it'll prune out. So I'd have a prune flag. Say, yeah, I know it's there. I'm waiting. I can reactivate it any time, and this will typically expire out. It won't necessarily stay there forever. So these are great. And that T flag is an important one, that one. So that's the shortest path has completed. If certainly there's a time element to it, but the T flag happens fairly quickly. It's not the kind of thing where I have to wait 60 seconds, a minute, 3 minutes. A little less certain on dense mode, to be honest, how long that should take. But with sparse mode, it darn quick, right? This should happen within a handful of packets. It shouldn't be minutes. If it's not showing as a T flag to the source, and then I've got another problem I need to investigate. And this will help you see, I know about this source. This is a group that, I have something that's interested in this group on this VLAN. So this is a lot of useful information. That this is one of the places you'll see me a lot in troubleshooting. And the other one is this count. And what count does for me is that I'm caring about these. So just giving you an example of this kind of troubleshooting, and then we got to wrap this up. That user said, vendor says, oh, the application is not working because of your network. Pointing at you. Yeah. I can use this, and I could see like from the first hop from his source, and I need to understand that. Sometimes they don't understand what's the source, what's the receiver. Sometimes you have to check both ends. You check one end, check the other, and it's like you see. And if I see for their group, I see nothing in this packets, like no packets. That's a problem. That's saying, dude, your application isn't sending. You can use a product like Multicast Hammer, if you can find it, any kind of multicast sending tool, and get it to send on the right port and right protocol for that group, starting with their source, and then look for it on the receiver. And you could follow across using IPM route count across hop by hop by hop and see where this count, you're still seeing traffic, and when it's going to start seeing in this start to come up where failed, RPF failed, other drops, where it's dying, it's not going there, right? And then you can start digging into the troubleshooting on that. So we're at time. We're going to pick up from here. That's great. So there was some new material for tomorrow. There's a little new today. Awesome. Glad you stuck with me for this one. I don't see any questions right now, but put them in the comments when you see it on LinkedIn or on the YouTube channel, and we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks.